Good day, Nigeria. Welcome to another edition of the Arena on Aneke TV, where we dissect the happenings in Nigeria. I am Faith Wins SZ. Today's program, we take a closer look at the realities and implementations of the Nigerians' minimum wage policy. In the year 2004, Nigeria's minimum wage was 5,500 naira, and later it was increased to 18,000 naira under the regime of former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. After which, former President Muhammadu Buhari on April 18, 2019, in the year 2004, Nigeria's minimum wage was 5,500 naira, and later it was increased to 18,000 naira under the regime of former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan in 2011. Moving forward, former President Muhammadu Buhari on April 18, 2019 signed into law the 30,000 naira minimum wage, which is what the majority of the younger people are very familiar with. And this also took effect on the same day. And today, 70,000 naira is the current legally mandated minimum wage. The law was formally enacted on July 29, 2004. So far, implementation across Nigeria has been relatively uneven, and some states have fully adopted it, while others have partially started, and nearly 20 states, including states like Yobe, Kaduna, and Ebonyi, are yet to fully implement. Typically, all public sector workers are eligible, but are they really getting paid? To help us understand the big picture of how many states fully are truly on board, the criteria of eligibility, and what this means to Nigerian workers, joining us today is an economist, a chartered accountant, and a lawyer. He's also the chairman, Nigeria Labour Congress, Enugu State. He is Comrade Barrister Fabian Wibo. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you for inviting me, Faith.
You're welcome. So, Barrister, could you please give us an overview of what exactly is happening in different state parastatals?
All right. With regards to the issue of minimum wage, you have taken time to roll out the history, so brief. I also want to tell you that minimum wage, which we celebrate, ordinarily it's not enough. Because if you look at the words minimum wage, or the sentence, you find out that it's talking about the least, an amount the least person in the cadre earns at the end of every month. That does not go to tell us whether that amount is enough, enough, or is going to be enough for the worker. It's just a minimum. Whether it's okay or not, it is a minimum. And that's why, for me, minimum wage is a big challenge for the workers. However, when it comes to implementation, Enugu State, the federal government approved 70,000 naira minimum wage, and they have since commenced implementation. Enugu State went far above the 70,000 naira approved national to pay 80,000 naira. His Excellency started immediately the minimum wage law was passed, and he paid at least, I think, 2 months arrears. And soon after the minimum wage law was passed, he continued the payment of minimum wage at 80,000 naira, which is far and above the 70,000 naira approved by the federal government. Since then, every worker in Enugu State is receiving 80,000 naira minimum wage, those in the public service. Of course, in the private sector, most of them are paying far and above the so-called 80,000 naira, 70,000 naira minimum wage. But within the public sector and state government of Enugu State, we are happy the government, notwithstanding the fact that that may not be enough or adequate, rather, but it is above what the federal government approved. So ordinarily, Enugu State workers appears to be better than those of them at that, in other states where 70,000 naira is the benchmark.
Oh, okay. So we can say for sure that Enugu state workers get the minimum wage. Is that correct?
Yes, I said soon after the minimum wage law was passed, Enugu State commenced the payments, and they have continued till date. Nobody's owed salary in Enugu State.
Oh.
Nobody's owed minimum wage in Enugu State. The present administration have ensured that every end of the month, workers receive their salary, and it's paid in accordance with the minimum wage, approved minimum wage in Enugu State, which is 80,000 naira.
So it's safe for me to say that I'm proud of Enugu State, right? Okay, and moving forward, for those who don't get it, like the SM, privately owned organizations and companies, what can they do about this? How do they get on board with this?
That's what I said initially, that I have a huge doubt as to whether there is any private sector that is not paying more than that 80,000 naira or 70,000 naira minimum wage. I know some of the sectors, private sectors that are affiliates or affiliated to NLC. You find out that, take for instance, MBL, the least worker there receives almost times 2 or 3 of the minimum wage we are talking about. And I know that cut across some other sector, the private sector, except probably very few who are housing very few number of workers. Of course, you know, if you employ workers less than 25, you are not mandated to pay this. They need to give you space to grow. But those who are able to hire up to 25 workers or their system or institution, they are bound to pay at least 70,000 naira minimum wage to the workers.
Okay, thank you so much. And why do you think we should be talking about minimum wage in Nigeria, considering that in other countries we have people who are paid hourly wages? Why should this be a topic of discussion really in our country?
We in the NLC have been advocating for even weekly payments to workers. But you know what is obtainable presently is monthly salaries. And what we are talking about, when you say adequate wage, not minimum wage, you know, people don't, the government and the employers don't appreciate it. They pay you what they say is minimum, that's agreed after discussions, roundtable dialogue on what should be. You know, in the past, this present minimum wage, when the negotiation was on, Labour insisted on 250,000.
Yes.
And the federal government said, the leadership of the government of Nigeria said, if we must pay you 250,000, then you should allow us to sell for whatever we like. So, and we'll consider the plight of those who are not in the formal sector, the informal sector, the artisans, those who are the organizers, those who buy 1 liter or 2 liters of fuel and use it to work for the day and feed from there. If we allow the government to sell fuel at 5,000 a liter, you know, it's going to be worse off on the people. So that was why we had to drop down to 70,000 naira to ensure that people don't go into further suffering. Now, because from the very day, 29th May 2023, God forbid, Nigerians were rolled into these pains of hardship occasioned by the removal of the oil fuel subsidy. As soon as we heard that fuel subsidy was gone, that was the beginning of our trouble in the country today. So NLC said we cannot join hands, you know, with this, with the leadership who have decided to plunge us into that suffering by allowing them to sell fuel at any price. Of course, if you're selling fuel, would have been selling for 2,500, 3,000 to 5,000 today if we didn't take that decision. And you know what it would have been? Maybe to move from here to Emene would have been about 5,000 naira or 3,000 naira transfer going and coming back. And how many Nigerians can afford that? So we're looking at the plight of an average Nigerian who is not in the formal sector. Assuming we are paid 250,000, and I think we are okay with that, and that for organizer, that pure water seller, that this or that those entrepreneurs who need this oil for them to run their system now cannot afford to remain in business. Have we achieved anything? We rather created further punishment for Nigerians than allowing the country to be better, the citizens to be better. So that was what we considered and said, let all of us suffer it together. Give us what you think you can give, provided you allow oil price to remain stable. Even though we have not gotten that, but I have to assure you that if not because of the NLC position, by now you won't buy for less than 3,000, 3,500 in Nigeria.
But considering that these oil wells are actually deposited here in Nigeria, are we actually being fair to ourselves that we have to consider or debate an overhyped price for fuel? And other states, I mean other countries precisely, who barely have fuel in their countries, they are being paid very good amounts as minimum wage. What do you have to say about that, sir?
Yeah, very well. The challenge we have in this country's leadership and anti-human policies. Like you're coming from your point of view, since we produce this crude in the country, why would we always be talking about hiking price and this and that?
Exactly.
The major challenge is dollarization. The producers of the oil and the marketers, they continue to look at the price of dollar. If we sell crude at $60 per barrel, at $120, I think it's almost nearly hit $200 per barrel during the Russia, Israel, is it Russia or Iran and Israel war that I think has ended just lately. The price rose to about 200, and immediately the price of refined also rose from 890 to 970, 950, 1000, depending on where you're buying. So if the producers, if the leadership of the country, if they were honest, you cannot produce crude, sell to Dangote, who has a local refinery here, at $1 rate. If you sell to Dangote using Naira rate, and Dangote produce and is selling in Naira, you won't have fuel more than 500 Naira later here. But when you want to sell, you are equating it to the dollar rate, or you sell at $1 rate, which after the exchange, that's what we call dollarization.
Yes.
You find out that the price is going to be very high. And that's why you see the price also trying to hit the roof like in other countries that are not producing crude. So the whole problem we have here is dishonesty. Dishonesty in every part and every aspect. If those who are in charge were honest to themselves, if they have the feelings of Nigerians, they should produce crude, sell to the local refineries at a Nigerian Naira rate, and by after production or refining, you find out that the price is not going to be up to 600 Naira a liter. Okay, if you look at, we have some modular refineries here and there in the oil producing states. The government is after them. You know, these are the people that produce. They are even willing to sell 400 Naira if you allow them. Why don't you give them certificates to produce? You want to close them down and use those who will produce and sell at the rate of at the dollar rate. So that's why I'm saying our challenge is insincerity.
Okay, fair enough. And we're really hoping that Nigeria would get better. And you're still watching the Arena on Aneke TV with Faith Wins Ezzy. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Arena on Aneke TV, and it's been an interesting conversation about Nigeria's minimum wage policy across Nigeria with my guest, Comrade Barrister Fabian Wibo, Nigerian Labour Congress Chairman, Enugu State. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
All right, and sir, what do you have to say about what is consequential adjustment, and how is it calculated across different levels?
All right. Consequential adjustment is simply that adjustment that differentiates cadre. From level 1 to level 2, you could see the difference. Level 2 to level 3, you could see the difference. From level 3 to level 17, it's a kind of adjustment that tries to show that this one is higher than the other. This cadre is lower than the other. That creates the difference where level 1, if level 1 receives 80,000 as minimum wage, level 17 receives about 400,000 naira on the whole. in the minimum wage. You can see the difference. So that adjustments from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 17 is what we call the consequential adjustment. Adjustments consequentially occasioned by different levels one is occupying in the service.
Okay, and so far with the minimum wage adjustments, would you say that every level is actually being paid just how they should be paid according to the new 70,000 minimum wage policy in Nigeria?
Okay, I should be talking about Enugu State here.
Okay.
After the approval of the minimum wage, the chart came out. We were not comfortable with the consequential adjustment. We actually wrote to His Excellency informing him about our dismay with regards to the consequential adjustment. And since then, we have not heard from the government. Also, a second observation we made is that there is what we call domestic DSA, domestic servant allowance, payable to deputy directors and directors. Each time minimum wage is paid, it is based on the current minimum wage. For instance, when in 2019 we moved from 18,000 naira minimum wage to 30,000 naira minimum wage, the domestic DSA, domestic servant allowance, payable to directors and deputy directors, rose from 18,000 naira to 30,000 naira. If you are a deputy director, you earn additional 30,000 naira to your salary. That's called one domestic servant allowance. If you are a director, you earn two domestic servant allowance. You know, in the past, once you get to that cadre, you have a domestic servant that serves in your. Of course, that time you have apartment, you have a domestic servant, you have a driver, and so on and so forth. You have a car attached to you. But Nigeria continued to get worse by the day, until you get to a point that you are giving a paltry sum of the present minimum wage as a domestic servant allowance to the deputy directors and directors. Unfortunately, in the present minimum wage in Enugu State, in its implementation, the government still pays the old 30,000 naira minimum wage. Ordinarily, a domestic servant allowance is supposed to be the current minimum wage. Like in Enugu State is 80,000. So the DSA of a deputy director should be 80,000 or 81 or 82, depending what a level 1 step 3 earns currently. The same thing goes times 2 to a director. But what we find today is old rate of 38,000 naira is still what is going on in the state. And we are also, each time we have opportunity to appeal to government, we continue to appeal to them to adjust this, to look into this plight and make an adjustment that will reflect the present day minimum wage, which ordinarily is supposed to be the domestic servant allowance. In the absence of these two observations we have made with regards to the minimum wage implementation in Enugu State, I think His Excellency will continue to appreciate him for giving us an amount far and above what the federal government approved. Yeah. We're still praying that he reconsider the position of government and direct that the domestic servant allowance reflects the present, the current minimum wage, and also look at the adjustments which appears to be less or nothing, and ensure that the consequential adjustment reflects something reasonable to show the position of a worker who is higher than the other in the state.
Okay. Thank you so much, Comrade, for sharing this insight and perspective with us. Your voice sure adds great clarity on such important national conversation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
And did you know that the first ever minimum wage was implemented in the year 1981 during the regime of former President Shehu Shagari, and the amount was set at 125 naira per month? I bet you didn't know that. And it's a wrap on today's program. Don't forget to follow us and continue the conversation across all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube, all at Aneke TV for more insightful updates on the arena. Thank you for staying with us. I am Faith Wins Azzy, and until next time, do take care and keep asking the right questions.